that were typos to Dave. So I don't know whether you want to take a second and go over those, or everyone is comfortable.
If you want to run through them real
Yeah,
fast.
just do it real quick so that people know what we're doing.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, these were all on page 3. And they started halfway down the page with a paragraph that starts, Mr. Steinbrink agreed with Mr. Broom's concerns instead of more. The next paragraph could set a precedent. The next paragraph after that, Mr. Hunt stated it could create a precedent. And then 3 more paragraphs down, starting with Mr. Courtney suggested a deed restriction. That's all I had.
Anyone else have any corrections? So I need a motion.
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
I wasn't there. I can't do that, can I?
No,
I'll second it.
thank you.
Mr. Broom,
Yes,
Mrs. Burke,
Sally,
you're muted, Sally.
could you unmute, please? Tom, can you help us? Sally, are you there?
I just asked her to
There she
unmute.
goes. She
There
got
we
it.
go.
I got it.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Burke,
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
okay. Mr. Deacon,
Mr. Deacon,
Is he muted?
yes.
Guess I'm not the only
I
one.
thought I unmuted. Yes, I'm sorry.
no,
Mrs.
great.
Hamilton,
Yes.
Mrs. Aug,
Yes,
Mr. Steinbrink,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes.
okay, thank you. That was helpful. Next on our agenda is a lot split for Bolingbrook Investments LLC property located at 7915 Fox Hill Drive. And there has been a change to this request, eliminating the Lensowitz variance. So with the lot split, it would appear that we really just approve this as a formality since they are required to come to us. But we're really just affirming the lot split. Is that correct, Todd? Todd, you're muted.
I did not see the follow-up communication, so I don't know what variants or variances are no longer necessary or why.
It's the Lensowitz easement change to fee simple. Joe Lensowitz wanted some time to look it over. So they withdrew. Dave sent an email saying that the Pinkuses withdrew their request.
Was that earlier today?
Yeah,
Yes.
later this afternoon.
Well, I'll have to rely on Mr. Biggert to have reviewed this accurately because I have not had the time to look at it today.
It's just a lot split with the 5 acres coming off on County Line Road.
Nancy, are you referring to the message from Dave at 1:30 today?
Yes.
Because it says down there are two requests. Well, let's see. Today's request will be to review 5-acre lot split, creating parcel 1, and a street frontage variance along Fox Hollow Drive for parcel 2.
That's how I see it.
Okay.
Oh, I thought that when I asked you about the Fox Hill, Dave, you said they didn't need, that they had access to Fox Hill Drive.
They do, but in splitting the 14 acres off, you create 2 lots, lot number 1
Okay,
and lot
I
number 2.
misunderstood your
Yeah.
communication that we
Right.
had after your email.
And lot number 2,
Okay, so we do have a
frontage
variance
variance,
request
as I see it, correct.
for
On
the
lot 2.
driveway access
Correct,
to Fox Hill Drive.
correct.
And I guess, I'm not sure who's going to make the presentation on the variance.
This is Jason Baylor.
Madam Chair, maybe it would be helpful if you had a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and BZA to handle both of these things together. I don't know how you approve a lot split without a variance.
Right.
So as long as it's okay with the board as a whole, I think that this should be decided together, and the first issue would be the variance before you could approve a lot.
So first we have to apparently adjourn the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission and convene the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Well, you can do it that way, or you could do a motion to just have a joint meeting since you're all the same people and you're all here, and that might be a little easier.
Okay. Could I have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Dave?
Mr. Broom,
Yes.
Mrs. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Deacon,
Yes.
Mrs. Hamilton,
Yes.
Mrs. Aug,
Yes.
Mr. Steinbrink,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes.
Okay, Jason, so you're up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Biggert. Thank you, board members. So just a quick recap. There were originally 4 requests related to this application, and we've reduced it at this point to really 2 requests. One is the approval of the lot split that we've provided a plan, a proposed plat for, and then the second is once the split is completed, Parcel 2 will have less than minimum frontage on the cul-de-sac. It's the nature of the cul-de-sac lot that we don't have the minimum frontage required, and so it necessitates the granting of a variance to let that new parcel exist at the end of Falabella Drive East. Does everyone have a copy of the plat map that was submitted?
We do.
And have you had a chance to see the updated plat that I provided? It's I've removed the content regarding there was a split area and a property transitioning over to the Lensowitz property. That's no longer part of the application. Does everyone follow that change?
Yes.
Okay. What questions, if any? I can go into the details of the practical difficulties of the situation for Parcel 2, but it's mostly related and common for a cul-de-sac lot where you'd be limited to the amount of frontage that one would have. This condition exists
Jason,
throughout the community.
can we, so I don't have, Dave, I think you may have sent that to the Battles Road email.
Okay.
Can someone
Like
forward to
maybe
the,
your packet, Scott.
well, my packet does not, I mean, my packet doesn't show fee access for Parcel 1 on Fox Hill. It just shows an easement.
Well, so if you look at that map, you'll see right at the cul-de-sac, a little triangle that they were cutting out of
Right,
Parcel 2 and adding to the Lensowitz.
right. To
You
Parcel
see that little
3.
triangle?
Right.
Yes, just cross that off. That's not being discussed.
So they actually have more frontage if they don't give that to the Lensowitz.
Right.
That's correct. It adds approximately 25 feet.
Okay.
So that actually improves the numbers.
And then
It does.
are we making fee frontage for Parcel 1, or are we just going with that easement, the roughly 25-foot easement?
The easements exist, so
Yeah, that's already there.
it's
That's
all
how the
already there.
Lensowitz is up, that's already part, they already have that.
You're talking
easement.
about the southern
Their
part of the
own
lot?
I'm
driveway.
talking about the southern part of the
Yeah.
lot, to go back to Parcel 1.
Right. All those
Oh, I'm
easements
sorry,
exist.
yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
those are all, yeah, all previously recorded.
Correct. Right.
Jason?
Yes.
Parcel 1 is accessed off of county line?
That's correct. We're proposing that the frontage sorry, Ms. Turner. The frontage is along county line for parcel 1. The frontage for parcel 2 is on the cul-de-sac of Fox Hill Drive East.
Okay, so
Just
we're only talking about parcel 2 and the frontage.
Parcel
Yes.
2 and the frontage is what the variance request is for.
Right.
And that parcel 2 does not meet the standard now. So
Right.
nothing's really changing. It's
Correct.
just because of the lot split, its access now is along Fox
Yeah.
Hill.
Okay, that
Um,
helps.
that-
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I think it would be helpful for Mr. Baylor to go through practical difficulties because that's what this is all about. And it may seem obvious to some people, but I think whoever makes the motion to approve or deny this request should have that information.
You mean in terms of whether the driveway would come off of county line?
No, the variance for not having the frontage that's required under the code. It's sort of obvious.
Oh, you mean yeah, I think it's kind of obvious, but go ahead, Jason.
Sure. Make the arguments for the variance to be granted for the cul-de-sac lot parcel 2. I'm going to jump around a little bit on the letter that was originally provided to the board. Parcel 2 is situated about the cul-de-sac on Fox Hills Drive East, and it has a necessarily small frontage easement because of the nature of the lots situated around it, and the geometry is such that while the lot is over the 5-acre minimum for the zoning district, that it requires that a shorter than 200 linear feet of frontage be accommodated. By granting these variances, we allow direct access to parcel 2. And it's unavoidable to maintain access to this parcel without the variance. So there is no other means to allow full use of the property, full value and use of the property. So the spirit of the code will be maintained through the granting of these variances, and the properties, it should be said, will remain largely practically the same as they do today. So
What's the difficulty in coming off of county line?
That's the question.
So the difficult to coming off of county line is that there is a very short, even shorter exposure to county line. It's a very thin thread, and it's predominant. The frontage to Fox Hills Drive East is much larger than what is left attached to county line.
So Jason, it looks like though you'd have to build on the side of the hill a driveway, and you'd have to cross looks like a creek there and build a bridge.
There would be substantial impact to the natural features of the lot. There's a riparian area that would need to be crossed if we were to try and access via county line. And again, I don't know that there is a there is certainly less of a variance to be granted to grant access off of Fox Hills Drive East than there is to grant off of county line. The county line variance that we would have to request would be substantial. Access to the property would be considerably limited and require involvement of potentially multiple organizations, including but not limited to the Army Corps or EPA, certainly the village.
You would need a variance dealing with the riparian also, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
So right now, there's nothing on this property.
It is empty, vacant, correct?
Right. And so there is no driveway that they could rely on coming off of even parcel 1 at this point. So it makes the most sense. The least disruption would be on Fox Hill Drive, as I see what you're drawing on here with this potential house.
That is correct, Madam Chair. Thank you.
And Jason, it looks to me like if you're looking at the building envelope that you have on the plat, that you would be talking coming off of county line. You might be talking, I'm trying to find another measurement, might be talking about a 2,000-foot driveway over challenging terrain. And practically speaking, what kind of cost? Would that be very, very expensive to do?
It would be, practically, if we provided a minimum access of 10 to 12 feet of paved driveway over 2,000 linear feet, I would expect that that's between $50,000 and $100,000 based on my experience. I know that's a broad range, but it does depend on the condition of the soils we encounter along the way. And it's not to mention the significant disruption to the natural habitat and features of the landscape.
And installing drainage and culverts and would be additional cost.
Absolutely correct.
And a bridge.
Yep, and a bridge.
Yes.
Okay. Those would be your practical difficulties with accessing the building envelope from County Line Road, right?
That's correct. Thank you for the additional inquiry.
This is Chris. Sorry, I'll just make the general comment. Usually, the cul-de-sac minimum width lot requirements are so you don't get a bunch of narrow pie-shaped lots on a cul-de-sac. If you look at this particular plat, there's 2, maybe 3 lots that touch the cul-de-sac, and this particular lot, even though it's got a very narrow frontage on the cul-de-sac, it's the 2 lot lines are almost at 90 degrees to each other. So the setback at the building line, which is really, what people pick up on from an eye standpoint, the building, the frontage along that front setback line is gigantic. And it's set way back behind the 200-foot building line at this point as well.
So,
And I was just
what
going
you're saying
to
is that the
I was just going to add that on parcel 3, there's already a precedent there. It's not 200 feet, I wouldn't think. Plus, that's a huge parcel.
No front.
well, and I don't think
Well,
the
there's
will be able
there's no frontage at all on parcel 3, so.
and the Hesses will not be able to see the house, or will they?
I've stood at the location of the home site with the potential new homeowners, and it's visible in the wintertime through the woods. The idea, though, is to provide a maximum separation between the properties, much as all the properties in the Fox Hill community. It's notable for its kind of separation from one property to the next.
Thank you. Any other comments? Are there any other comments from the commission?
Just a
I have,
couple of,
I'm
What?
sorry, I just
Sorry,
have
go
one
ahead.
comment real quick. Do you guys have a timeline that you're looking at building this house?
Nothing at this time. So
Okay, because we're getting ready to repave Fox Hill and Fox Hill East this summer, just so you know. So as you get ready to do anything, make sure you talk to us about vehicle traffic, etc., because we may have some comments on that.
thank you, Mr.
Sorry.
Courtney. I appreciate the heads up. I believe that any construction practically wouldn't begin until next year, and we'll coordinate with Dave and the village in terms of protecting the new investment.
Jason, just a quick question. So on parcel 1, I assume that parcel's then no longer going to be part of Fox Hill Homeowners Association with access being off County Line Road?
There are several examples of properties that don't have frontage on Fox Hill that are part of the homeowners association, and I did not anticipate that it would cease to be part of the homeowners association. A split is occurring within Fox Hills homeowners association.
Okay, and then but the intent would be, it looks like there's that 50-foot easement there, and so the driveway on the new, at least the way this is platted, it looks like part of that driveway is on that existing easement that's there. And I assume that easement is probably for the property to the south of where parcel 1 is.
That's correct. There is yes and no. That easement actually predates the formation of the Fox Hills Drive as it exists today. There's a lot of history there, and part of the reason that we came to this board meeting with a last-minute change to our request. But as part of a little bit of investigation into the history of this property, there are a number of easements that were for a proposed development that were recorded at one time. And so that's a part of that earlier development recorded in the 50s at some point. So that's what that easement is you're looking at there. And it could be used for access for either parcel along county line. That's correct.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand what, potentially the commission would have in the future with this lot split if somebody were to buy that and then come in front of us and trying to find access off of Fox Hill to access that property. So that clears that up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, there's one question, I guess, that I'd like to follow up on Mr. Steinbrecht's comments or question. Is there does appear where the driveway is proposed for parcel 2 that part of it is on that easement. So are you telling me that the easement is for the benefit of all parcels that touch that easement? Is that correct, Mr. Baylor?
The easement is not currently written with the intent for the benefit of parcel 1 that will be created. I'm questioning parcel 2 because as you show the potential driveway, it does cut across that easement. But I guess it is on parcel 2. Okay, I get it now. That's okay then.
Yeah, I think that one's fine.
Yeah, that one's fine. Madam Chair, did anybody else want to testify?
Well, I was going to ask for other comments from any adjoining property owners or interested parties. After I finished with the commission, I think we just had one more before I go there. Scott, were your questions answered?
Yes, I mean, I do have one more. It's just the math.
Sorry,
So
it'll
if
just take a second till we finish with the commission.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I have one comment.
Wait, Chris,
Sorry.
Scott, speak, please.
Oh, okay. So just on the math here.
It's hard on Zoom.
So the parcel 2 is going to have a frontage of 79.55 feet. And we'd be looking for a variance of 120.45 by my math. And I'm backing into that.
79.65.
But it's an arc, Chris, so is it longer?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the
C7
curve table. It's C7 and C8.
C7, correct.
So it's 25.19 plus 54.46, which is the arc length of both of those curves.
Yeah, so that's 79.55, right?
6.5.
Yeah, you're right. 6.5. Okay. So we're looking at 120.35 as the variance.
Right.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have.
Chris?
There's flags there's some flagging that's identified to the left of the driveway going to parcel 2, and then in the back of the lot on parcel 1. Is that wetland flagging that's been placed out there?
Oh, sorry. Let me explain. The flags that are visible both on the plat map and in the field are layouts for the septic systems as part of the pre-approval for the lot split. We're gaining approval through Cuyahoga County for those.
So that's your primary and duplication area, or just primary?
That's correct. Primary and duplicate. It's a combined. So you've got a primary and duplication
Okay.
next to each other in both those areas.
Answers that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
Courtney.
Okay, now our audience participation of anyone who has an interested. Go ahead. I lost your name here. Oh, Roger, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm representing Jeff Jacobs tonight. I just wanted to make sure that the existing utility easement that's in place is still going to be respected. Probably 20 years ago, Jeff decided to take all the utilities that ran to his property overhead and put them underground, and then also created access to the existing pole that's there where the utilities terminate and then go underground. And I didn't see anything on the plan that showed the pole or responded to that easement specifically. So I was just curious.
Jason?
I can comment on that, Mr. Dorer. Thank you for the question. There are no changes to the easements regarding the utilities that were established quite a few years ago, or that you mentioned. And so those all stay in place, or there's nothing planned for those time. And the utility pole that everything is fed from does appear on the map to the right of the cul-de-sac. There is a faint line. It's got a double hash in it, or a triple hash actually, that represents the route that the underground utilities took from that service pole to feed those other area to feed the other two lots.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else care to speak that I have not recognized? I'd like to make sure everyone has a chance to speak that wishes to. Thank you.
Nancy, I'm sorry.
Scott,
Joe Lensu.
am I ready
Joe
for
Lensu.
you?
Nancy.
Oh, I'm sorry, Joe.
Yes, Nancy, thank you. Jason, how much room is there between the utility pole and my current driveway? I can't figure out that measurement.
Wait, Jason, you're muted.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I wasn't looking at my screen, pardon me. The distance between that pole and your driveway is approximately 80.5 foot. So about 80 feet from the pole to your driveway, directly.
Thank you.
Further, it's hard on Zoom to make sure I have everyone without the raising of a hand or something. Okay. Scott, do your magic.
Okay, we have for consideration a application for a variance for the property located at 7915 Fox Hill Road. And our applicant here, this is Bolingbrook Investments. Correct?
LLC.
That's
Correct. That is
Bolingbrook
correct.
Investments LLC.
That
All
is
right.
correct.
And we are looking for a lot width variance of 120.35 feet, allowing a frontage width of 79.65 feet on Fox Hill Drive East. And so the first question is, the property in question will or will not yield a reasonable return, and there can or cannot be beneficial use of the property without the variance because. So in this situation, theoretically, there could be a reasonable return. The lot does have access on County Line Road. However, that access is approximately 2,000 feet, crossing various geographic features, including a riparian area, a creek, may have to build a bridge and install significant drainage. The other thing about this is that the lot already has this frontage. We're not adding or subtracting anything. We're considering this because we're splitting off another lot that has frontage on County Line Road. So while the property in question could yield a return, not sure it could be a reasonable return because you couldn't access it from the access. You couldn't practically access it from County Line Road. The variance is substantial or insubstantial because, so numerically it's substantial, but practically it's insubstantial. It already has that frontage on, it's already been platted with that frontage on Fox Hill Drive East. So there would be no change in outward appearance of the lot, other than a driveway for a residence on the lot. And even if we didn't do the split, they could still build a house there. They would just have more property. The essential character of the neighborhood would or would not be substantially altered. The adjoining properties would or would not suffer substantial detriment as a result of the variance. Here, they would not. I mean, they could already build this house as it sits. And again, they're not narrowing their frontage at all. The variance would or would not adversely affect the delivery of governmental services. So that's not an issue. The applicant purchased the property with or without knowledge of the zoning restrictions. According to the applicant, and it appears that the frontage ordinance was passed after they purchased the property. So they would have purchased it without the knowledge of the zoning restrictions. The applicant's predicament feasibly can or cannot be resolved through some other method other than a variance. Here, as we've discussed and we heard testimony, putting a driveway in from the portion off of County Line would not be feasible. Number 7, the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would or would not be observed and substantial justice done or not done by granting the variance. Here, as Chris Courtney pointed out, it's pretty common to have a narrower spot right on the end of a cul-de-sac with a lot widening out, and this lot widens out. Really, granting this would not offend the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement. And so with those items in mind, I would move that we approve the variance with the one caveat that the variance does not negatively impact any existing utility easements. Can I say that, Todd?
Certainly.
And so with that, I would move approval of a front yard width variance in the amount of 120.35 feet for the property located at 7915 Fox Hill Road.
I need a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Dave?
Mr. Broom,
Yes.
Mrs. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Deacon,
Yes.
Mrs. Hamilton,
Yes.
Mrs. Sog,
Yes.
Mr. Steinbrink,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes,
Thank you very much for all
Now
of
the
your
lot
efforts.
split,
So we need to handle the lot split separately and go back to our part of our joint meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I need a motion to approve the lot split, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Bigger.
Mr. Broom,
Yes.
Mrs. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Deacon,
Yes.
Mrs. Hamilton,
Yes.
Mrs. Sog,
Yes.
Mr. Steinbrink,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
yes.
Now, Todd, I want to continue the meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals, or do I need to adjourn the joint meeting and
Joanne and Vera Schneider.
Yes, you might as well adjourn the joint meeting.
joint
go
meeting and
into
then
Board of Zoning Appeals.
reconvene the Board of Zoning Appeals? Thank
Correct.
you. So I would like to do that. Could I have a motion?
I so move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
Second.
Dave?
Mr. Broom,
Yes.
Mrs. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Deacon,
Yes.
Mrs. Hamilton,
Yes.
Mrs. Sog,
Yes.
Mr. Steinbrink,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes,
Okay, then. So we'll go to the now second item on the Board of Zoning Appeals agenda, which is a the horse paddock and size setback variance request for the Bell residence at 2105 Woodstock Road. Eric Bell is the homeowner, and I believe he's here to make the presentation. I saw him earlier somewhere on my screen.
I'm here.
Oh, thanks, Eric. I
Hi,
don't
everybody.
have, I don't have, your picture is missing.
Well, so I have two devices open because Dave said I might need to bring up the site plan. So my voice is coming through on the iPad in case I have to share my screen. And then my picture is also on my laptop. So hopefully everybody can figure out what's what. If I switch it around, the echo is terrible.
Okay.
Okay, so hopefully everybody can follow along. First of all, thanks so much for having us up here this evening. My wife Jody and I, we live at 2105 Woodstock Road. We've owned the property since 2014. And the house sits on roughly 9 acres. Jody has a passion for horses that date back to when she rode at the Hunt Club as a child. And we've talked for years about having horses on our property, but she finally found a way to get me to say yes. She showed me what's called a Falabella miniature horse. And for those of you who don't know, and I'm assuming most of you don't, a Falabella miniature horse is an Argentinian breed of miniature horse that, unlike other, small ponies and miniature horses you may have seen, these are really proportionally exact, but much smaller. A standard size horse is somewhere around 5 feet tall and weighs 900 to 1,200 pounds. These miniature horses are 2 to 3 feet tall and weigh between 150 and 180 pounds. Let me back up for a second. I want to apologize to our neighbors because it was our intention when we decided to come to the village for this to reach out to our neighbors, but the date caught up with us. I asked Dave to forward our contact information because he can't share yours with us. And we never had the opportunity to talk to anybody. I'm hoping by the time we're done, you'll realize that the way we're proposing to do this is actually to everyone's advantage. But I just wanted to make that point before I continue with our presentation. The whole idea of this is for us to have, this is very private. This is not for public. This isn't for visits. We're not going to have, we're not going to open up to classes from school or hospital children or anything like that. Although there is an element of it I'll talk about in a second, where we may train one of them to be a therapy animal and take it to visit patients who will benefit from that. The whole purpose of this is for our own personal private enjoyment. So not a petting zoo, not a public thing, very, very private and personal. The Gates Mills ordinance regarding horses, there's only one ordinance, and it relates to standard size horses. It requires that a landowner who wants to have a horse to have at least 1 acre of land per horse, and they have to clear at least 20,000 square feet of paddock area per horse. And then there's some other side yards and setbacks I'll get into in a minute. We think that providing that much, we could do that. We have the ability. Our intention is to have up to 4 miniature horses on our property. So according to the code, we'd have to have at least 4 acres, and we have approximately 9. And we'd have to have at least 80,000 square feet of paddock area, which we could do without affecting any side yards or setbacks. We think, though, that is so unnecessary because of the difference in size between a standard size horse and these miniature horses. If we were required to do it in accordance with the current ordinance, we would have to clear more than double the area we're talking about clearing. So that would reduce all the existing buffering beyond what we're asking for. It would reduce the distances, it would open the neighbors up to what we're proposing to do. And so our request for the variance regarding the area is to allow us to maintain more of a buffer. And what's really important, and it was included in my letter to the village, and then a subsequent letter from the president of the Falabella Miniature Horse Association. The president wrote with her experience about how much acreage is necessary. 20,000 square feet per standard horse. These guys require less than half of that, but we're proposing 10,000 square feet per miniature. So instead of 80,000 square feet of paddock area, only 40,000 square feet of paddock area, which again, we think benefits everyone, us for the visual impact, but also to screen our neighbors from this as much as we can. The other variance we're asking for, there is the requirement that the paddock area and the barn be at least 150 feet from any residence and any residential dwelling, any house. So what we're asking is that that setback be varied by 50 feet, but only as it pertains to the setback from our house. We'd like to bring the paddock area 50 feet close to our house, which increases its distance from the neighbors around us. And we thought, again, it's not a necessary thing. We just thought that it presents a better aesthetic for our neighbors, will result in the less of a chance that anybody feels any kind of interference because we're doing this. I think those are basically the points that I wanted to make. Just looking real quick. I think that's everything I wanted to cover in the presentation. As I mentioned, I'm able to put the site plan up if it would be helpful, and we're open to any questions that the neighbors or the board has for us.
Madam Chair, may I make a comment or a question?
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to know if Mr. Bell had received today a letter from Attorney Kenneth Fisher representing your neighbor, the Slavens. I know that.
I didn't receive the letter. I did not receive the letter, but I actually got a call. I know Mr. Fisher. He gave me a call and he mentioned that he was representing one of our neighbors and that there were concerns about how we'd be using it and expressing a desire for our neighbor to meet with us. And we are more than happy to talk about what we're planning to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the commission?
Is it a state requirement to have a house 150 feet away from the barn?
Yeah, that's really seems to be a Board of Health issue.
Yeah.
Chris?
Nancy, I had submitted an email that had a number of different engineering related items that would be required if the variance were to be considered and the project advances beyond this stage. So you have that. They include site plan, and I included the Gates Mill site plan checklist because this involves a barn and an acre of cleared area. There'd be an NPDS permit and a stormwater pollution prevention plan that would be required. There would likely also be required some sort of stormwater management, so some sort of bioretention or retention area because of the amount of land that's going to be cleared. And then there was a couple other items as well.
Right. I received that earlier this afternoon, but that would depend on the variance being granted.
Yes.
And if I may, I'm not sure how relevant it is, and I'm not familiar with the health code provision, but we're not talking about moving the barn 150 feet closer to the house, just the paddock area. As I specified in my letter, because these miniature horses have a tendency to gorge themselves, and you've probably seen those, if they're allowed to graze too much, the idea was that we would also have as part of the paddock a fine gravel hard surface where they can't eat to their heart's desires. We thought we'd like to have that between the barn and our house. So we're not moving the barn any closer to our house, but by allowing our paddock area to be within 100 feet instead of 150 feet, it shifts the entire paddock area further away from the neighbors. I don't know if that makes a difference under the health code.
Well, you'll have to find out.
Okay.
Eric, this is Sandra Turner. Hi.
Hi.
I've seen pictures of the horses and they're really very, very cute. I've never seen any in person, however, but I've seen Shetlands and these are a little different. You did express the fact that you'd be using these horses or having these horses for your own pleasure, for your own personal enjoyment. I think there was a comment, and perhaps in one of your letters, about showing the horses. So I want So if you could clarify that, I guess I'm interested in whether there's any intent here. If you're talking about showing, is that like at the 4th of July parade or perhaps at a
Right.
hospital? Are we talking about professional showing, which could then involve breeding and, more of a business kind of operation? So I just
I know
want to
Jody's
hear.
dying to get in here, so I'll let her answer. But my answer before, unless she hasn't told me everything she's thinking,
Uh-oh.
we're certainly not we have no intention of showing them competing, any of that. I know we spoke with Mayor Schneider about this. She's got a little bit of a history with horses, we think. And she did mention the idea, wouldn't it be cute if they participate in the 4th of July parade? I think if it's something people want, I can imagine us doing those things, but I'll let Jody talk about it.
Go ahead.
You can definitely have one for the parade. We are not planning on showing at all. These are purely for pleasure. And we were talking about possibly considering maybe having a baby and then figuring out what to do with it. Not what to do with it. Maybe it would return to the breeder.
Yeah.
So, but that's all in the future because the horses we'll be purchasing will all be yearlings, and you cannot breed them until they're 3 or 4. So, but it is. I'm not really sure what our plan is regarding that. Maybe 1.
Mm-hmm.
But at no time would we have more than 4. That's always been our
Right.
understanding. Because again, the neighbors' concern about privacy and screening and all of that, we really want this to be aesthetically pleasing. Obviously, it's going to be to us because it's something we're choosing, but the need to clear more space is something we're really reluctant to do. We think that by getting this variance on the amount of area that we're going to clear and use to maintain these 4 miniature horses really allows us to do the best possible job of not infringing on anyone else's property.
I just would like to clarify one thing more. Are you removing
the question about
hard surface there, Eric, to put in the static?
Yes, we would be taking the tennis court out. Our intention has been to take that
Thank
out for a few years and we just haven't done it yet. But that's absolutely a part of the plan.
So you would be removing hard surface and replacing it with permeable surface. Is that correct?
I wish I'd thought of that. Yes.
Yes.
That's a very positive development.
Yeah,
So that will improve drainage on the property
absolutely. And I'm not
and
familiar with
runoff and runoff into the stream below.
No, that's right. And I'm not familiar with everything that Chris mentioned about the engineering requirements, but we will absolutely involve professionals to be sure that it's done right and that we absolutely meet every requirement that pertains to this.
And Eric, I have one thing, and I really want to ask this because I would love to make this a crisp bullet point. Do you guys have a manure management program for what to do with it?
Very fair point. So
yeah.
as of today, we haven't determined which direction we go. There are two ways to handle this as we understand it. The first way, and it's what I think most people who own horses in residential, neighborhoods, they have a service that comes like waste management. They come and they pick it up, whether it's once a month, once a week, depending on the volume that's created. As you can imagine, these little guys, especially if we control their grazing, they produce a lot less than would standard size horses. The other option would be to compost the manure. We've been looking into it a little bit. We think from an environmental standpoint, that's a really responsible way to do it. It is done in a way that completely eliminates odor, but we haven't determined which direction we're going to go. But we're certainly not going to have a big pile of manure building on the property because it's as we try to bring it closer to our house. Jody may like the smell. I do not like the smell. So that's not something that we would be doing.
So
my neighbors have horses across the street and they have waste management come and they have a regular waste management bin.
So does the Hunt Club, and they also have a cement pit. If you want to go down and look at it, it's behind the barn by the river.
The Board of Health will require you to do these things. They got involved with the Hunt Club, as I recall, Emily.
Yep, they did.
So it's not a, you will have stringent requirements on how to deal with the waste because the Hunt Club had to completely redo its waste treatment plan. They used to have a mushroom farmer come and pick it up, and that became a whole different situation.
Makes sense.
So on the variance, could we require a manure management plan? I mean, I think, Todd, is that something we could do? You're muted, Todd.
We can do whatever we want.
Well, you can't do whatever you want, but a condition
Mostly,
that's
Todd, you
reasonably
let us do what
related,
we want.
that's
Okay.
reasonably related to the variance is acceptable, yes.
All right. And Chris, your email with the stormwater requirements, the site plan, stormwater pollution, stormwater management. Is that confined to just the requirements that would be needed for this? So if I reference your email?
You reference email and then the existing code, because really everything that I've identified is what would be required under the code.
Right.
But I didn't do, because it's a preliminary plan, I didn't do an exhaustive review on it.
Okay.
So,
It would really not be necessary, Scott, under our codes. They have to be followed regardless. So.
Okay. Okay. But the manure management we could put.
Yes.
All right.
I have a question for Chris.
Yes.
Chris, Mr. Fisher in his article, I know the neighbors have private well systems. They do not have city water, I believe. And he mentioned that there's an intermittent stream that runs through the middle of the proposed horse stable, which could result in contaminated runoff, polluting the groundwater aquifer. Can you just comment on that and what your professional advice is? Is that something that's
it's certainly been raised as an issue, so we will review it in the context of this plan. We don't have enough information on this plan yet to be able to fully assess that, but we'll certainly involve the County Board of Health in that to make sure there's no concerns about drinking water contamination. Whether or not it's an intermittent stream or just a swale, I don't know. That's kind of an environmental buzzword, an intermittent stream. It would be a regulated stream. If it's just a swale, it wouldn't be, but we require that any applicant have a letter from an environmental engineer indicating that there's no impact to streams and wetlands, or the impact is going to be permitted, and here's how it's going to be permitted. So we will look at those things as the plan advances, and some of it we don't have enough information yet.
I just want to sum up Chris's comments that until they meet those requirements, nothing could proceed.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And if I may, with respect to this intermittent stream or swale, we certainly have, as I mentioned, we could do the 80,000 square feet required under the code. We certainly have the ability and more than a willingness to move the lines of the paddock to be sure that we don't make any impacts that we're not allowed to make. So we're very open to that.
Andrew?
Chris, I just had a question about in your list of items there, is there anything related to sound or noise level?
Nothing related to those things, nothing related to noise.
Okay. Eric, tell me a little bit about the horses in terms of, it's small horses, so small nays?
My understanding, and again, Jody may be able to give you a little bit more information. My understanding is that their voices are smaller. I don't think it's like little dogs that yip as opposed to big dogs that bark loudly. Yeah. I think that there's probably the same amount of braying, but it's a much smaller voice.
The only thing that would bring significantly more noise would be if we had a stallion on the property. And, the males are all about calling his girls, and that's not going to happen.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm glad she said that.
So maybe Eric is kind of a follow-up to Sandra's question. Can you maybe help some of us that maybe aren't as well, familiar with horses, but is familiar with kind of the smaller breed? Is this 3 or 4 of these equals one horse. And kind of where I'm going with this is obviously these ordinances are in place for specific reasons around health, the number of horses, the size of the paddock and so forth. And while I, based on what you're saying, I don't think I have any concerns that it will be done in the right manner and taken care of. I often wonder what the next homeowner will do in terms of having a dozen of these or more, and kind of the unintended consequences and effects
Right.
that go on around this. And,
Right.
and Nancy and Todd and Scott, maybe this is a broader question around, we've got an ordinance around horses specifically, and does there or should there be something reflecting this smaller breed? Because again, my concern is that, Eric, and you're certainly within your rights to put the 80,000 square feet in there, but the ordinance today would limit how many horses that you have on that property.
Right.
And I don't know that same I don't want to use the term restriction because I don't know it's a restriction, but obviously there's waste, there's health considerations, neighbors and so forth, that I don't know that would be something that would be in place.
If I could respond, and then I'm sure that there are other thoughts on the call. One of the things that we specifically didn't ask to vary is the 1 acre per horse requirement. So theoretically, even though the amount of paddock area is being varied for us under these circumstances, the number of horses anybody can have on their property isn't being varied. So I think that's a part of it. And then the other thought is it probably, I suppose if we'd had the time and the interest in doing it with the village, maybe the right thing to do is to write a specific ordinance governing miniature horses, because they are very different in size and need for both food and exercise.
Well, couldn't we limit you to 4 on your property of the miniature horses as part of our ordinance, Todd?
Yes, tied to the variance, certainly.
Yeah, so that would entail Scott's manure management and limited to 4 Falabellas.
Correct.
That's certainly okay
Except
with
for your
us.
temporary baby that you're gonna disappear after a very short amount of time.
Well, if you could please limit us to 4, because that way it's not me telling Jody no more than that.
I get it.
Maybe the funniest thing I've ever heard in one of these
When I
meetings.
get rid of Eric, I can bring one in.
Yeah, there you go.
I require much more than 1 acre.
Okay, any other comments from the commission? Then if not, hearing none, I'd like to open it up to the neighbors who all have comments, I believe. So who would like to be first?
May I?
Who's may I? I can't.
Veronica.
Oh, Veronica, thank you. Go
Okay,
ahead.
well, thank you very much. We received the village letter dated the 21st of April, landed in our post office box on the 26th, which didn't really give us much time to get ourselves organized and figure out what is going on over here. So the first of our concern is the negative impact on our property values, the diminished property values. I mean, imagine if someone is driving up on my driveway, our driveway, and they see a paddock and a bunch of horses and everything that they entail. And let me say this about big horses and mini horses. A 5-pound bag of horse manure or a 10-pound bag of horse manure is horse manure. But someone's coming up the driveway and they say, whoa, we're really interested in this home, but I don't like having these animals this close to my patio where I have breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day from spring until fall. And that is 100 feet. And from 100 feet inside the garage, within 10 feet, we have our well. And that is our only source of water, not just for us, but also the Morrises share in that well. We have no other water. The impact of the runoff from the urine and the manure could very potentially destroy our well. And then what do we do? Not only that, but run off into the streams. We have a very delicate ecosystem here. The erosion over the last couple of years has been incredible. Someone brought up stormwater management. We haven't heard anything about that or how it's going to be addressed. What's next? Sheep and goats? Every barn is susceptible to mice. And with the mice come cats, feral cats, skunks, coyotes. I don't think that any of these critters can read a property line and say, whoops, that's the Slavens. I'm not allowed to go in there. I can't go and pee into Veronica's rose patch. And our garden is right there. And I do a lot of gardening. As a passion, as a matter of fact. And what about the flies? And all these other pests? I could be sitting out on the patio with my husband and my family, enjoying a dinner, and then be buzzed by flies. And then you mentioned about breeding and just one pony. Well, you know, one baby pony, and he's so cute and adorable. Well, we'll just keep it. Will there be water in this barn? Is there going to be a toilet facility in this barn? That hasn't been answered. So mostly we are very concerned about the diminished value of our property. Someone else's passion and hobby can destroy my property and the value of my investment and my husband's and poison our well water. I'm sure there's somebody else who could say other things, but those are my questions and my concerns. And I'm very, very concerned about this. It's too close to our property. And there's so many potentials that can negatively impact us. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Betsy.
I concur with Veronica's concern about our water. The well we share, we looked at having city water come down. We weren't able to do that. If we went down our driveway, it was absolutely prohibitive. And that was 10 years ago. And we can't go underneath the Land Conservancy land to bring water down there. Also, I'm a huge wildflower girl. I mean, you should see the trilliums right now, the violets, these unbelievable swaths of wildflowers are right at the property line where you're going to be clear cutting those trees. I'm very sad about that. I can't, you know, it certainly might be in your right to do so, but the water and the erosion is really going to be a problem. It's already a huge problem in that ravine. There was a big movement a few years ago to be sure to introduce some native trout. We've been lucky enough to have some pools with some trout sightings and salamanders. That will not survive this plan at all. And so as much as I am, you know, I see that you're passionate about horses and they're wonderful little critters. I mean, I would love to see you at the Hunt Club stables or at Whitenorth or Fieldstone, and you have every right to do it on your property, but I'd be very careful because that stormwater plan has to be solid, and that's gonna I think require you to plant an enormous amount of plants to sort of balance that out. But we'll see what the plan says. But that's my concern. So,
Chris, do you have any comment there? If you're finished, Betsy, are you okay?
I'm finished for now. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Chris.
Yeah, There's a lot of information that has yet to be submitted with respect to a lot of the details regarding how the resident concerns would be managed. So I just want to say that a lot of the questions, they haven't even lifted a pencil to look at it yet because they're trying to determine if a variance can be granted to allow them for a smaller paddock. That's essentially, as Eric mentioned, if they wanted to build a standard sized paddock, they could do it, but it would probably be more of an impact to the residents downstream. So the stormwater information will be looked at very closely once it's prepared.
Madam Chair,
Sir,
I don't believe that we got, for the record, the home addresses of Ms. Slavin and Ms. Moore.
oh, I apologize. I'm sorry. When our community members speak, I need your addresses. Betsy?
Sorry, 1977 Woodstock Road.
Betsy?
1987 Woodstock Road.
I don't make a habit of appearing in front of commission, so I didn't know I have to say my address.
It's my fault for not asking you. I apologize. We had a lot on our agenda. Scott, are we ready?
I am.
Thank you.
We have an application for a variance on a paddock size variance for the property located at 2105 Woodstock Road. And the applicants are is Eric and Jody Bell. So the first question that has to be answered is the property in question will or will not yield a reasonable return, and there can or cannot be a beneficial use of the property without the variance because. So in this situation, there most certainly can be a reasonable return and a beneficial use of the property without the variance, because the property owners could do exactly what they propose to do without a variance. But they would be taking up a significantly larger amount of their property to do what they want to do. The ordinance really has, it appears, at least on its face to me, to have two purposes. It provides, in the first part, room enough for full-size horses to exist happily on the property. And then in the second part, it provides protections for neighbors and public highways and things on where these accommodations for horses can be located. And in this case, the property owner is requesting to reduce the size of the area provided for the horses due to the fact that these are miniature horses. And then in the second case, by shrinking the footprint of the paddock facility or the private stable, which is not exactly clear from this, shrinking it to bring it further away from either any property in the neighbor's property lines, and then moving it closer to their house. So the two requested variances are to shrink the paddock size and then to move the paddock closer to their own residence, which would pull it away from the other residents. So while the property could yield a reasonable return, it appears that in doing so without a variance, it would have a much larger impact. And that kind of runs us right into item 2. The variance is substantial or insubstantial. So again, this is numerically substantial, but practically it's not. They could do it without a variance. They don't need to come to us. They could make 40,000 square feet, 20,000 per animal, and they could do it. What they're doing here would have less impact on the neighbors. And again, the variance, it just uses the word horse. It doesn't say miniature horse. It doesn't say full-size horse. It just says horse. But given the history of the village and the fact that miniature horses are relatively a newer phenomenon, I think it's fair to say that this was intended for full-size horses. The essential character of the neighborhood would or would not be substantially altered. The adjoining properties would or would not suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the variance because. So again, the property owners could do this without a variance. And if they did it without a variance, I think arguably it would have a much larger impact on the adjoining property owners. They are removing some impermeable surface of the tennis court, which collects water and has to send it somewhere. They're replacing it with a permeable surface that of gravel that would be able to absorb rainwater that would fall. Obviously, as we've heard, there are stormwater management rules and site plan ordinances and everything that would have to be followed in order to do this. So given the fact that the property owner would still have to meet all of those things, I don't think the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered by granting the variance. It would be more altered if we didn't grant the variance and the property owners followed the code here. Plus the fact that there are a number of horse properties in the village, and horses have always been a part of the village's history. The variance would or would not adversely affect the delivery of governmental services, water, sewer, garbage. It would not. The applicant purchased the property with or without knowledge of the zoning restrictions. Well, they did. But again, if they followed the zoning code, they would likely have a much larger impact than their proposed use and the request for the variance. Number 6, the applicant's predicament feasibly can or cannot be resolved through some other method other than a variance. Well, here they could. They could do it without a variance, and it would likely cause more harm than what they're proposing to do on the smaller area with the miniature horses. Finally, the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would or would not be observed and substantial justice done or not done by granting the variance. So the variance, again, it provides for, looks like health and safety of the horses, maybe health and safety of the residents. And it protects the neighbors by requiring setbacks. All of those will be met here, and they will be met on a much smaller scale, which parallels the smaller scale of the miniature horses versus full-size horses. So really, the proposal and the request for the variance by the property owner here probably upholds the spirit and intent behind the zoning ordinance rather than is contrary to it. And so I would move that we approve. I would make a motion to approve a variance to reduce the paddock size to 10,000 square feet of paddock area per miniature horse. That we also allow a 50-foot variance for the paddock to be closer to the Bell's residence. So it could be 100 feet as opposed to 150 feet from the Bell's residence. That the property owner be required to prepare and submit a manure management plan and
Limit.
the number of horses to
Thank you.
4 horses on the property.
Do I have a second?
That would be miniature horses.
4 miniature horses to the property. Yes, thank you, Todd.
Scott, I have a question. You mentioned about the waste management plan, but what about all kind of the other requirements that Chris mentioned? Are they all part of the waste management plan?
Todd, do you want?
Part of the requirements of the state that they will have to meet in order to do what they're doing. That has nothing to do with our ordinance or our variance.
Well, no, I think if she's referring to stormwater management, that is our ordinance. And that doesn't, I
It's
think as
separate
Todd
from the
said, that's
variance.
already on the books, any requirement regardless. It doesn't need to be stated because that's a requirement. No matter
Yeah,
what.
it's separate from the variance. Those are,
The problem with trying to state what other codes they should comply with is you'll forget something and not included in this motion. They are required to meet all other codes regardless of this variance.
Okay.
We're only varying the one accessory use code with respect to horses.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chairman,
Thank you.
Wait,
Madam Chairman,
yes.
Thomas Slavin, I'd like to make a comment, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
no, he's sitting off.
I'm not in the line of fire. The purpose of my comment is very simple. The comment is this. We're looking at unintended consequences. That's very significant. When Betsy Morris was talking about extending the water line down from Woodstock Road to our properties, the cost of that water line, the last cost that we had estimated approached $500,000. That's a lot of money. And that has a significant material impact. If there are consequences that are unintended from leaching of the manure and urine and so on into our watershed, into our drinking water, I can assure you that there are going to be consequences, legal consequences that aren't going to stop it. We cannot afford the risk. This sounds like something that's very dilettantish. Everybody is going to have a good time playing with little horses, but the fact of the matter is, if somebody gets tired of the horses, they're sold, they can't find a buyer, what's going to happen to all of this? We have a stable situation that has existed for decades, and to fool with it at this point in time is just a vainglorious effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate your comments. I need a second.
Hey, Todd, I just want to, I'm sorry, Scott, I just want to make sure you did say that that was one horse per 10,000 square feet of paddock
Yes.
space. All right, then I'll second that.
Let's go ahead, Dave. Mr. Biggert, let's call the roll.
Mr. Broom,
Yes.
Mrs. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Deacon,
No.
Mrs. Hamilton,
No.
Mrs. Sog,
Yes.
Mr. Steinbrink,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes.
The motion would pass.
Thank you all for your comments, and we'll watch this unfold and make sure that everything that you requested has been addressed.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda is a sport court rear yard setback variance request for the Peter residence located at 941 Chestnut Run. Thomas Peter is the homeowner. I have to find you on my screen.
I'm here.
There you go.
Nancy, before we begin, I need to recuse myself. As a member of the Gates Mills Land Conservancy, which is contingent to this property, it could be an appearance of conflict of interest.
Well, Scott has the same problem. Todd, could you comment? They're just members of the board.
Yes, I have discussed this with them. They are members of the board, so they have some voting power. It's my understanding that as a general matter, the Land Conservancy may be opposed to this application, but regardless of whether they're opposed or in favor at this point, I think there's at least the appearance of a conflict of interest. And I don't think it's fair to the applicant for Ms. Turner or Mr. Broom to participate. The appropriate thing is to announce at the beginning of this case that they have a potential conflict of interest and recuse themselves and not participate at all in this case. Now, I will leave that up to each of them, but that's my advice.
Okay, I'll need to ask someone else to prepare the remarks for the motion. Craig, would you be willing to do that?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you have the form with you?
Yes.
It's attached to thank you very much. Okay, let's let Mr. Peters go ahead. Mr. Peter.
Yes, thank you for hearing me. My wife and I bought this home about 4 years ago, and we began a project this winter to beautify the back of our home. We're doing a lot of addition of trees, shrubbery, plants, and along with that, we decided to add a pickleball court. I was unaware, as was our contractor, that there was a setback rule relative to a pickleball court. The court winds up being 12 feet at one point, as you can see from the drawing, and 5 feet at the shortest point from where the back property line is. The reason this spot was selected was so that it would cause the least disruption. It was a flat clearing, so that didn't require removing any large trees, and it also was a flat area. It also was set back further on the property so that it wouldn't disturb our neighbors on either side. And the only home I know behind us is actually off the south, my neighbor to the south, his southeast corner. So it's a long way from that. I know there is a driveway back a number of feet. I don't know how far it is. That's the situation. That's why we selected the spot. And again, it was trying to be in such a way to be considerate of our neighbors, not to cause an issue. That's my presentation. If anybody has any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them.
Comments from the commission?
Has it already gone in? Has the court?
Yeah, the concrete pad was already put in place this winter. We're down in Florida. It was put in while we were away, and Dave called us and notified us that what he was expecting something else. He saw the pad, which is why we're in front of the commission. We had no idea that there was a regulation to set back relative to the court. So it is in place. So if the variance is denied, we'll have to demolish the court.
Just so you understand, you are required to be knowledgeable about all of our ordinances. That isn't.
No, it's right. Ignorance is not an excuse.
Exactly. It is.
It's a statement of fact, but it's not.
Doesn't help you out, unfortunately.
I understand that. I completely understand that.
I have a question myself. Have you had a survey done of the property?
Yes.
And so you have the survey to show where the markings are for the pins? So that you know exactly how far you are.
Yeah, please. I was going to make a comment about that because the sketch that was included looked like it was generated off the county, a handwritten version of the county GIS map, but I need to see an actual survey prepared by a surveyor since this is so close to the property line.
We can get a surveyor. Before we did any work on the property, we surveyed it, and the stakes are in the ground from the surveyor's report. That was measured. That map was just prepared by our contractor, so we can get the actual survey report so that you can see it. But I'm quite certain that it's accurate because he measured off the stakes that were put in by the surveyor.
Mrs. Hamilton, did you have a comment, Emily?
My dog's was going nuts.
Okay.
If the pad hadn't been already, the concrete pad had not already been done, I would have thought it would have been easy to move it. But I know that the Conservancy is not interested in having it there. We got that letter today. And Lucy Chamberlain isn't happy with it. So, there are some neighbors who should be chiming in here eventually.
They will.
So Chris, are you saying that before we can make a variance that you need to have better drawings? And so do we need to postpone this
Well,
or?
the information that's submitted should be accurate. If we're granting a variance, it should be an accurate number, especially since it's so close to the property line, assuming that you're going to move forward with it. If you don't intend to grant it, then and it's going to be 50 feet off the property line, then the boundary survey should be done and should be submitted. We should have an accurate drawing showing that it is far enough away from the property line, or it's 5.5 feet, whatever it's going to be, not just a general estimate.
But the variance request is a 35-foot variance from a 40-foot requirement, correct?
Correct.
So you really only left 5 feet there at the property line.
Correct.
On one side.
On the one side, it's 8,
side.
it goes out to 12
Correct.
feet on the other side, but the closest is
But-
5 feet. Correct. That's
Correct.
correct.
Other comments from the commission?
Chris, do we have a topo map of this to see if it could be, moved or put anywhere else?
I sent you guys there's an email that I sent earlier today that had an aerial photograph that shows the pad area, and it
That was
shows
in your
the
packet,
topo
I
on the aerial
believe.
photograph.
That should
What's
be
that?
in your packet.
It was.
Well, no,
it's
the
not a
aerial
topo, it's not
photograph
topo.
wasn't in the packet,
Yeah, the topo is not on there, but I've got.
but I have
Yeah.
that in an email. I believe it was sent. Was it sent to
Yeah,
everybody?
I sent one email earlier that had attachments for both projects, and it was attached to that one.
Right.
Aerial
it's the
photograph
second
with the
one.
topo.
If you go to his 12:35 PM email.
Okay, I've got it here.
So you'll see the first one is the horse. Actually, it's the first photo is the pad of the topo map. Good thing we have more than one device that we can look up at the same time.
Yeah, and so,
A busy day.
my question on this is that, I guess it's unfortunate the concrete pad's already been poured, but, as I look kind of to the north and west, is it possible, or would it have been possible to move this a little bit further or closer to the house? And, Nancy, you bring up a good point. If this was, a few feet, I mean, this is a pretty substantial variance in terms of being, it's asking for 35 feet, and it's effectively on the lot line. And, once things get landscaped and there's activity around it, I assume there's going to be activity into the adjoining property. And so there really isn't much room that's being left there.
I don't see a lot. I don't see a big difference in the topography if it were to move further away from the property line. Regarding the trees, it's tough to tell because everything is bare here. But from a topographical standpoint, it doesn't look much harder to slide it away from the property line.
Well, it's
Well,
not.
the concern that kind of comes up from your topo map, honestly, it almost looks like it's on the property line, which is a big challenge of its own. But I hear what you're saying about the movement on that is the Conservancy's property, which creates its own problem, especially if there's going to be an entrance or I assume it's not fenced, so there's going to be people moving on both sides of the court.
Well, that's the side, that's the side of the court. There shouldn't be a lot of activity there. A ball may go out the side, but the activity would be at the other ends of the court. But there will be some activity on that side, very little, I would expect.
Other comments from the commission? Then I would like, Todd, go ahead.
I think Mr. Courtney raises a very good point, and that is that we really don't know exactly what the distance is from the property line based on the sketch that we got. very difficult to grant a variance or even to assess a variance and perhaps deny it without some accuracy. It'd be fine if it was within 6 inches, but when you get out to a feet or 2 feet or more, it might make sense to continue this matter. I know there are a lot of people who want to testify tonight, and you can take that testimony this evening if you wish.
Well, I think I'd like to do that since we have all of the members of the Conservancy that are in attendance that have comments. So I would like to take the testimony so they will come back, but so that they don't have to come back if they don't choose to. All of the members that are here, and I don't know if they're all going to comment, but it is a very difficult situation for us. And I like the idea of continuing it to see the feasibility of moving it and how close it really is to the property line. I mean, we're very sensitive to the fact that this pad is already there and it's very expensive to move it. But we're also sensitive to the delicate nature of the Conservancy's view of its properties. So it puts us in an extremely difficult position. With that, I'd like to take the testimony of those who wish to comment from the Conservancy Board or any other adjoining property owners. And then I'll get the sense of the commission about whether they want to continue today or move it to our next meeting. Do I have comments from?
Yep.
Thank you, Linda.
And I'm representing the Land Conservancy this evening, and all of you received a letter. I hope it was timely enough that you had a chance to get through the whole thing. And we realize this is, a sensitive issue. Tom, I mean, you're my neighbor. I live on your street. I appreciate the work that you've done in the beautification of your property and your interest in using the property for your purposes. But I think it's important to note that property that we own as the Land Conservancy was not just purchased with Land Conservancy money, which is taxpayer money, but it was purchased with funds not only from the tax levy, but it was purchased with funds from Clean Ohio, along with some private donations. And as a conservancy, we have a responsibility to uphold the restriction requirements. And, setbacks are there for a reason. And we feel that property is encroaching on Land Conservancy property that we have an easement on, along with the Western Reserve Land Conservancy. So we have looked at it. If it's not right on our property line, it's pretty darn close. And Western Reserve Land Conservancy was out taking a look at it as well and made some other comments that there's been some encroachment of piles of logs and wood chips and, causing soil and habitat disturbance. That borderline happens to be in a wetlands area, and there are some other trees that are in that area that could cause some additional problems down the road. And the encroachment on our property we feel is pretty severe. So we're not in favor of, and we are objecting to issuing a variance on that property. And we have a responsibility as a Land Conservancy to uphold the stewardship of that property, as we have been given the funds to preserve that property. And I get it. It's a sticky wicket, but there's a lot of equipment back there that I'm certain that pickleball court could be moved closer to your house. And whether that's a desirable option for you. I mean, we can't tell you what to do with it, but we can also object pretty strenuously to offering that variance.
Yeah, I don't think it's feasible at all to move it as far as you can't pick it up and move it. It's
Oh.
concrete. It'd have to be jackhammered out and moved. And, you know, we'll look at that. I mean, if we lose the battle, we lose the battle, and we'll just have to destroy trees that we didn't want to. There's large trees that we wanted to preserve the nature of things. So we'll have to go back and make a determination on the whole thing. I hear what you're saying, and I'll see what the commission says, and we'll hold anything that comes from that.
I think our position's pretty clear. We object to it.
Are there any other comments from other attendees? Or just, that's going to sum up all of the other comments? And the letter that you wrote. So I'm thinking the way we'd like to.
I'm sorry, but I think Lucy's on this call, and I think she's trying to unmute herself. It looks
Oh,
like.
there she is. Okay. Well, just wave and we'll recognize you.
I'd
Sorry.
just like to say that I second Linda's comments. I think, you know, we wish we could be, you know, empathetic or, you know, work with Mr. Peter, but I wish that he had checked out some of the ordinances before getting into this to save us all from even being here today. And I am concerned likewise for the entire issue of water drainage on that hill is an issue. And when you put more hard surfaces, you have more problem with runoff. And so I think that's something everybody's aware of with the Sherman Hill. If you drive Sherman Road there, you know how the hill itself, the road has been undermined by the amount of water runoff. So every time you add another hard surface, you're adding more of an issue there. And that in turn affects the river below us. So
I'm sorry, could I speak to that for a moment?
Sure.
The one thing that I'm not an engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but I know the people that put this in put specific drainage underneath the system and have directed the water in such a way. So it's not it is in fact a hard surface, but they did put drainage underneath it to keep from having problems, so that the water could be directed in a way not to cause issues. Again, that's something that you guys are far more experts in that than I, but that's what I understand.
Well, I appreciate that detail. I just think that would have been helpful earlier to know. I have no information about that and no way to judge it. I haven't been on the property or anything. So it's just a concern that we minimize environmental impacts by dealing with them ahead of time rather than allowing them to be an issue down the line.
Yeah.
So I too feel that it's, I object to the variance as well, because I feel that it should have been treated properly in a permitting process rather than just going ahead and then finding out later that it's a problem.
Madam
That's
Chair.
all.
Yes.
And additionally, there's been wood chips and soil that have been pushed up against, you know, two very healthy trees on our property.
Right.
I'll make sure that's remedied tomorrow. I was unaware of that. Like I said, my wife had heart surgery, so we were there briefly, and we've been in Florida since. So I will call the people and make certain that they remove anything that's in any trees in the property.
And any fallen trees.
Yeah.
A lot were there when we moved in.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
No, it's hard to do these things, you know, from afar, and, you know, when you're not present when these things happen. I mean,
and if my wife hadn't had open heart surgery, I would have been much more involved in the process. And again, my responsibility, my fault, but that changed our plans for the last few months.
And we are very sympathetic to your situation.
Oh, I appreciate that. I know everyone's just doing their job. No hard feelings. I completely understand.
Chris, were you going to make a comment or
I
Todd
was.
was?
Again, for the record, if we could have addresses in relationship to
I'm
this
sorry.
property, so that we have a good record.
Linda and Lucy, could you please
I'm
give your address?
Lucy Chamberlain, 7840 Sherman Road. And Linda,
I'm 987 Chestnut Run.
Thank you.
Yeah, generally,
Really here
more hard,
representing the Conservancy.
Yeah, I'm representing the Land Conservancy, not a
more
You
neighbor.
want
hard
to give the
surface is
address
going
of
to
that
generate.
property? Do you have the address of the property on Sherman Road? Conservancy property?
No, I don't actually. I don't know.
I
the
have
address.
it. I have it.
Okay, Dave
I'll have
has
it for
it.
the
Thank
record.
you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Generally, more hard surface is going to lead to more runoff, even if there's stone underneath it. So the comment that was made regarding there being more runoff with a pickleball court, there would be, just so you know that.
And we've
So, Chris,
had problems on that
Yeah.
side of Chestnut Run overall because the runoff is horrible. And we've lost, on my side, every year we lose probably 10 to a dozen trees.
Yeah, given the size of the pickleball court and the context of the entire drainage area, I don't think the impact would be substantial, but there will be more water that would run off. So that's certainly true.
So Chris, could you clarify in terms of putting in the pickleball court, unrelated to the variance, would there be other requirements that you would want addressed before this pad was put in?
Generally, we'd want to see a site plan and we want to look at the drainage to make sure it's not going to be like running directly off into the neighbor's swimming pool or something like that. But it's such a small disturbance that there's not going to be any stormwater, retention requirements or any real hard, just be an abbreviated stormwater pollution prevention plan by the code. But we'd want to see a basic site plan.
So you'd want to know what the contractor had put underneath there, or how would that work?
Yeah, we would generally have a cross section for the pickleball court that would show the thickness of the slab, the stone that's going underneath it, grading and drainage around it so that we can determine impact on downstream property.
So if we are considering tabling this to the next meeting, is that correct, Todd, to get the survey?
I think that's important here based on the testimony from the Land Conservancy with respect to how close this may actually be to the boundary.
Yeah, I think it's fair to.
That is what I want to do, but I want to make sure that in tabling it, we require Mr. Peter to get to Chris before the next meeting where we will consider this, what magic is going on under there, so we know that as well.
Yeah, I think it would be, in order to resolve it with one return visit, I think it's fair to get the survey done, or at least get the drawing if the survey's already been done that shows the existing slab in its current location and the property line, so we can see what that exact setback is, a cross section for the slab and how the grading has been done around it in order to try to address any runoff related concerns. That would be one, and that would be considered for a variance. The second drawing would be one that has it behind the setback as it would be required by code, so that you can look at what the impact of tree clearing would be and grading would be to move it to a different location and kind of approve it on a what you see is what you get type approach, where you can either leave it where it is and it's going to be the impacts that we can assess on this drawing, or we're going to have them move it. It's going to be an impact to him, but here's what's the impact's going to be from a clearing, grading, and drainage standpoint.
Exactly. Is that clear, Mr. Peter?
Crystal.
Any?
Nancy, just one quick follow-up. I
Sure.
see that the part of the code is also reviewed by ARB for landscaping and screening and lighting and so forth. Is that before? Would we need that as part of this process, or if a variance were not to be granted, that goes after the fact?
Dave?
I think the site is the biggest thing I mean, to me, the site is the biggest thing you need. And then if the variance is granted, again, the other details can follow before any permit would be issued.
Yes.
But how does that affect the pad, Dave? If we were to grant a variance?
Well, the pad's already there.
That's what I mean. So what would that do? If that went to ARB afterward, it's already there. I mean, that they would then require, how could he put screening in if it's 5 feet from, or 1 foot or a half a foot from the property line?
I mean,
normally that's what we
it's
would
not
have
required.
done.
A court is not required to go in front of ARB.
Okay.
It says
So
here
that
under
wouldn't
item
have been
6,
relevant.
it says any proposed tennis court or sport court shall be reviewed and approved by ARB, which shall review and provide for adequate screening, directional lighting, and landscaping.
Then it can.
So I just want to help Tom out in terms of next steps, and so.
Right, yeah, and our intent is to have no lighting and no screening, but I get it with landscaping, and I'll look into that when we get back. We'll make sure we provide you with everything at the next meeting.
That will be June 1st. Are you going to be back by then?
Yeah, we're actually heading back next week.
Okay. So do I need a motion to table it, Todd?
Motion to continue till the June 1st meeting.
Could I have a motion to
I'll
that
move the
effect?
Motion to continue this until the June 1st meeting.
Mr. Biggert?
Mr. Broom?
No, we can't have Mr. Broom and Mrs. Turner have both recused
Gotcha.
themselves.
Yeah. Mrs. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Deacon?
Yes.
Mrs. Hamilton?
Yes.
Mrs. Sogg?
Yes.
Mr. Steinbrink?
Yes.
Okay, then. So we'll be back, and this will be on our agenda for the June meeting. It's possible that you all can talk to each other and see if there's another option before then.
Tom, are there any questions through the YouTube?
No, not at this point in time. I'm sorry.
No, not Tom, Peter. We're talking about Tom Robinson.
Sorry about that.
Different Tom. You had 7 people viewing the live stream. We're down to 2. I'm 50% of that number. And there were no questions asked throughout either of the meetings.
Very good.
Thank you.
But you're 100% in our book, Tom.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, well, all right. So I guess we're going to be adjourned. Thank you all. I know this was a really long meeting. I really appreciate your attention and diligence in these regards. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Right.